You're listening to Forging Fluidity with Savannah Wishart and Griffin Coombs, where we humbly navigate the idea of primal purpose, exploring conversations around physical, psychological, and spiritual well-being on the quest for a truly conscious and meaningful human experience. I'm Griffin, and my co-host is Savannah. She's a self-love expert and fine art photographer. She uses life coaching and forest bathing photo sessions to create conscious containers for people to lean into vulnerability and explore their relationship with themselves.
And Griffin is a body awareness and breathing expert who uses targeted physical training and stress resilience coaching to help people become more physically capable and emotionally grounded.
What is it that makes you trust or connect to someone else? Do you have more confidence in those with a more refined expertise, or do you feel more at ease with those you feel like you can deeply relate to? And when the tables are turned, how can you tell if you're showing off versus naturally expressing yourself by doing the cool things that you do? These questions have led us to a conversation that digs into various levels of relatability and how each one can be perceived by other people. Whether it's a friendship, romantic prospect, or professional relationship, how comfortable we are with others partially depends on our preferences, but above all else, probably depends on the person's authenticity. Join us as we wrestle with assumptions, projections, and insecurities in an attempt to untangle exactly what that means. Without further ado, please enjoy this very relatable episode.
This week, we're talking about two different topics that, when looked closely at, they kind of weave together and are complementary of one another. So we're going to be talking about relatability as well as peacocking. And so how relatable do we need to be when we are sharing our story to the world? And then that leading into the question of, are we peacocking in the sense of, do we show off our accomplishments to gain something, or are we just excited and proud of who we are being and what we are doing? And with that excitement, we just want to share it with people around us. And what prompted this conversation was that I went snowmobiling a couple weeks ago for the first time, and I never have been a motorsport person. So I had this idea in my head that it's like a car. It just takes you somewhere in the snow, and how hard can that possibly be? And I was instantly humbled with my weak forearm and grip strength, try to hold on to this machine going 20 to 30 miles per hour up the road. And it was incredibly challenging, which I should have expected, because the person who took me explained it as doing CrossFit while surfing in the snow up a mountain. And I mean, that description says it all, really. So how could that be easy? But I ended up doing a lot better than most first-timers, apparently, and got just tons of positive feedback throughout the whole experience. And afterwards, I had this question in my head about, what is it that makes it so easy for me to just go into these difficult mountain sports and figure out how to read lines and how to hold body positions and how to hold like a machine or a bike, and how to create the bike body or machine body separation. And my conclusion when speaking with Griffin about it was that I've always done really hard things, but my hard things have been one of two different paths. The first path being emotional challenges or mental challenges, so dealing with mental health for a lifetime, and then the emotional challenges that I'm not really going to go into right now, but of having other people trying to destroy your life and you not really being able to do anything about it. So that is something that I really fought for a few years, which, if you know me, you know the story. I'm not going to dive into it, but like, those are challenges that life presents to us that we don't choose to go into. And so our own training in our daily life that is what builds the resilience in order to step into those challenges that we don't want to participate in. And so, related to relatability, my consistent training up until the last few years was that in Stockholm, I would do rucking events. And so I was talking to Griffin about this of just, I'll do 12 hours of starting at 9 p.m., going to 9 a.m., carrying 45 ish pounds on my back in a group, passing around partner weights, carrying partners, doing burpees in fountains in the middle of the city at 2 in the morning. And I said to Griffin, I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Maybe people don't do those things. And he kind of laughed and was like, yeah, people are not doing burpees in the fountain at 2 in the morning. And so just kind of seeing it through that lens of that is a very specific, difficult challenge. And when I go into the mountains, whether it's on a bike or splitboarding or snowboarding or now snowmobiling, it's a challenge that I choose to step into, and it's in a beautiful package. There's a beautiful landscape to look at. There's snow, and I love snow and the weather. And it's just compared to the things that I have done to this point, it's not easy, but it's so much about mindset. And the mindset piece, I think it's like, I don't know, 70% of it, probably 70% mindset, 30% grip strength. Maybe that's a little bit off, but it just takes so much resilience to just be like, yeah, I'm choosing to be here and this is fun for me. But then I don't know, how do you get to that point? It's probably possible to get to that point without having to suffer so much in the years prior to be able to step into those spaces. So that led to our question of relatability. And so kind of giving me a little bit of a light bulb moment to feel like, okay, I don't know anybody here that has done burpees in the fountain at 2 in the morning or carved an ice bath in the middle of the countryside in Stockholm at 2 in the morning either. Like, I don't have anyone here I can talk about those experiences with and relate to. And that crossed over into how you show up on social media, what is authentic. And then that kind of led into peacocking. So are we, the conversation that prompted this was more personal life stuff, but even in our professional life or social media, like how do we draw the line between knowing when we're just showing off for the sake of showing off versus we're excited about who we are and how we're showing up and what we're doing. And we want to share that from a place of purity with no agenda attached. We're not trying to influence people or manipulate them, but we're just purely excited to be like, hey, this is my life. This is what I created. This is what I'm doing. And I want to invite you into it.
From my perspective, I have sort of three boxes that I'm kind of putting this concept into. There's people who are peacocking in the sense that they're showing what they can do or showing what they do or what their life is like. And then there's the people who position themselves as somebody who does cool things. And then there's people who are ultra relatable, let's say. And I guess this is less personal and more professional because I'm just trying to relate this to Instagram, social media in general, and how people walk that line of authenticity and also trying to influence people. I do believe that certain people can influence people authentically, but but not everybody. For some people, it's very inauthentic. So
And you
if you look
can't
at,
be called an influencer for it to be authentic.
yeah, that's automatically disqualifies you if you're called an influencer. I think that if we take the fitness industry, for example, you have people who are coaches who demonstrate what they can do all the time. So their whole social media is just, them doing feats of strength or athleticism or whatever. And then you have the others that position themselves as experts, but maybe don't show off. And I think I would fall into that category. Now, I don't think either is right or wrong. I actually should show off more, probably, because I do think there's an amount of peacocking that sort of serves as almost social proof in a professional setting. Like if you were trying to gain an audience, or if you're trying to sell services, you've got to walk the walk. And so showing people, if you were coaching people on mindset, or just, let's say, life coaching people, or embodiment or whatever, and you're showing yourself at 2 a.m. doing burpees at a fountain, that's somebody who's walking the walk. And some people need that. Some people need to say, like, it's not really about what you're telling me to do. It's about, can I trust that you've actually experienced that this works, and that you're speaking through first person perspective. Others don't really care about that. They care about the information. They care about maybe your ability to teach, coach, guide, nurture is a little bit more important. And so you might position yourself as somebody who knows a lot about the stuff and make that really clear in how you talk or how you write or whatever, but you're not showing, look what I can do, because it's not about what I can do. It's about all these tools and ideas that I have that can help you. And then there's the super relatable person, where it's not either of those, and it's showing yourself, but it's showing yourself not as, look what I can do, but here's what I'm going through, follow me on this journey. So you're not positioning yourself as an expert. You're also not positioning yourself as living proof that something works. You're sharing an ongoing journey. And so if you were to extrapolate that to like a personal example, it's kind of similar, where it's like, okay, do you document all of your cool experiences so that you can show them to people? Do you talk about cool experiences as like a talking point, or as a fun way to engage with somebody, but it's not about, I documented this and here's proof? And then there's just, people who just don't do those things, and just those things, they come up organically as they come up. And again, I don't think any are right or wrong. I think it probably comes down to authenticity, which is, again, personal. And I don't really know how somebody could judge somebody else for a lack of authenticity, or confirm that they are authentic, whether they're peacocking, or how they position themselves, or whether they're really relatable, except that feeling that you get, where it's just like, this just doesn't feel like it's congruent with who they are. And that's something I think a lot of us can intuit. But also, those 3 boxes, I just made those up. So maybe that's not even accurate at all. That's just that's just how my brain organized this information as you were talking about it. So I'm, open to other models as well.
Yeah, I think those boxes they summarize what I said pretty succinctly. I would say that without any judgment, looking at those boxes, it feels like the ones to aspire to would be the first 2, of showing what you're doing as an example and pairing that with actionable items that others can do. Because, we see this in the coaching world all the time, or in the fitness world. The best athletes do not necessarily make the best coaches. So they can show like all of the cool fitnessy things that they're doing, but they might not be able to break it down into teachable moments. And so just because you're good at something doesn't mean that you can explain it and lead others on that journey. And I think that's a big part of the relatability journey is, can you break it down into the beginner's mindset for someone? And can you meet them where they're at? And there are certain things that when you are at such a high expert level, it gets hard to be able to go back to that first step and to really invite someone there. And that, I think, is where it's easy to fall short of being relatable with people, because it's just kind of like, well, like, this is where I'm at today, and it can be simple to take the steps to get here. But because we've been doing X, Y, and Z for so long, there becomes, it's almost a disconnect of how do we, like, we've done this for, I don't know, a decade. So what were those first steps that took us on that journey?
And then I think you'd also have to ask yourself who you're talking to in the first place. Are you talking to somebody, maybe it's not authentic for some people to talk to those who are at the very beginning of their journey. Maybe it's more authentic to talk to people who are where you were a year ago and they're hitting a certain sticking point that you were hitting. And we don't have to curb the way that we talk about our experiences or our expertise to suit everybody, because that's impossible. But that could also apply to your social life. It's like, I don't know, if you're into mountain biking and maybe you don't go mountain biking with people who are below a certain standard of performance just because that's not who you go mountain biking with. That's not the experience that you seek out. And so you don't really have to worry about being able to relate to somebody who's at the beginning of their journey, because you just choose not to go mountain biking with people who are at that stage. When it comes to, I don't know, self-development, similar stuff. We've talked about this before, where there are a lot of people who are just completely unaware, living in the matrix, quote unquote, with no desire to get out, no desire to become aware of their personal journey or fulfilling their potential or anything like that. And we're not hanging out with those people. So we don't have to be able to talk to those people. Now, if from a professional setting, if those people are your audience, that's one thing. But again, if you're not inspired to help the people who are there, to help the people who are, miserable, working a dead-end job, going home, drinking a bottle of wine or a case of Coca-Cola or whatever, and, passing out and doing it all over again, then like you don't have to be able to relate to those people, because maybe you're talking to somebody who's kind of there, who wants to get better, who has some nice, good habits, but are just stuck. So yeah, I don't think that every good teacher or anybody who even wants to talk about their own experience personally has to necessarily adopt the beginner's mind. But I think it would serve us all if we were all a little bit more conscious about who we're talking to, where they are, and do we want to be talking to people at that stage of whatever journey it is,
Mhm.
and adjust accordingly, I guess.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. I think also just we can water our own expertise down if we feel like we have to backpedal into that beginner's mindset too much, because like there is a place for it. And I think, how do you titrate between sharing expertise and sharing a little bit of where you came from, if that is your goal, to attract people to grow from that place, and to say, hey, like, this is where I was at, and these are some of the steps I took. And even though it's taken 5 or 10 years, like, this could also be what your future looks like if you want to put in the work. And I think one area where I'm personally kind of trying to figure this out right now is with my nude photography. And I had a show a couple weeks ago, and some people were bringing attention to the scars that I have on my body and just pointing them out, and like, oh, yeah, like another photographer might Photoshop these out of the picture because they're imperfections. And I don't know. I think they were implying that they could be seen as something ugly and something negative. And for me, I think because I put my scars there myself, then I was forced to come to a place of self-forgiveness with with um with essentially like the permanent branding that I put on my body. And I don't know, like I had some interesting comments from people about their own scars, and someone even said to me like, you wouldn't want to photograph me with this scar, and it really annoyed me because I don't like people telling me what I would or wouldn't want to photograph, or what, like, they just put themselves in a position where they're body shaming themselves, whether it's scar, whether it's a scar or whether it's age or whatever, and they're projecting their insecurity onto me and putting a false judgment onto me. And I just like, I think scars are beautiful, and I've been thinking a lot about, like, is there a difference in the forgiveness process of a scar that was created from like a doctor to, I don't know, take an appendix out or do heart surgery or whatever it is, versus versus the scar that you put on your body yourself. And I was thinking about it, and with the surgeon example, perhaps there is disappointment in the body because something has gone wrong and your body has malfunctioned, and it's just like, and there's a feeling of betrayal of, my body should have done this and this failed, and why doesn't my body work the way that it needs to? And then someone had to go in and fix it. And so I could see like there could be this feeling of shame of the body just not working as it is designed. But I mean, that's also the evidence that is left on my body, is that my brain was not working in an optimal space. And so it's a similar thing of like, I felt broken. Like, even if someone didn't come in to take out a part, like a piece of me felt like it was malfunctioning. And that is the evidence of trying to control the pain that I felt mentally and emotionally, and focusing it in on a physical piece of pain that I created for myself. So I don't know. I feel like the forgiveness process is similar. All of that being said, the whole point is that I've been thinking like, how do I bring more of that story into my work? Because and into my art of just not just the body dysmorphia. I feel like that's fairly easy to talk about, but I forget about the piece of the scars because they're a part of me and I don't think about them. And I've done that healing forgiveness process years ago, and so they're not on the top of my mind. And so even I forget, like right now we're in the winter. If I meet new people and make friends, like they're not seeing my body because I'm wearing sweats and hoodies most of the time. So then it's just always interesting. Like, I'm a little bit aware of it and like, oh, I wonder what this person might think once I reveal my arm or reveal my thigh and I'm wearing shorts and a tank top. And I don't know. It's just an interesting process. And I think talking about those things of self-harm and mental health could be a way to build a bridge between ideals and the beginning of that journey. Because if you look at my art, like it's very easy to be like, oh, like a very fit toned body, she must have always been this way. That's an insecurity of a projection that I put on it. And that's not the case. Like it took so much work to get to that point, and it continues to take so much work. And there is a very in-depth story behind everything. And if you look closely, you see the scars, but that's not what you're going to see at first. So breaking it down for people in that way, I don't know if it's a beginner's mindset, but it's just being more vulnerable to tell some of the roots of the story that I planted a really long time ago. So they're covered in lots of soil and I've kind of forgotten about. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
It was a great talk. And that's a great example of why there's a degree of relatability that's important. And as you talk about this, I'm realizing that maybe relatability becomes more important the more emotional or the more vulnerable one needs to be to go through the process of whatever the topic is. So you're talking about nude photography is very vulnerable, getting naked for the camera.
Mm.
Also, talking about mental health struggles can be a vulnerable thing for a lot of people. Just in general, these are vulnerable things. So I wonder if people are gonna gravitate more toward relatability to know that somebody can empathize with them through experience. And with the fitness industry, it's kind of similar, and I don't know that people treat it as such a vulnerable thing as they do some other things that you might coach people in. But, people, especially people who are just starting out or people who have been injured or people who just don't know what to do, like there's so much insecurity around the body and how the body moves and what the body looks like. And so the, again, I guess it depends on who you are, but it's like, are you looking for the person who is doing crazy athletic things? Because, and there are people like this. There are people who would say, if I want to learn boxing and I had the choice, I'd learn from Floyd Mayweather. Or if I wanted to learn, insert sport, if I want to learn how to play football, I'd learn from Tom Brady, and it's just like,
Mm.
no, I would learn boxing from Floyd Mayweather's coach. And
Yeah.
it's not just because you did a great job explaining how just because someone's good at something doesn't mean they know how to teach it, they know how to break it down. I would go a step further and say there are some people who not only can't teach it or break it down, but it comes so naturally to them that they never actually went through the process of having it
Mhm.
broken down for them in the first
Mhm.
place. And that could apply uh, like you said, to having like a fit toned body. There are people who started out pretty athletically gifted and played sports their whole life pretty naturally without a lot of dysfunction in their body. And because they were able to play sports, be athletic, be active all the time, they established a baseline metabolism that allowed them to put on muscle, keep fat off. They always looked good. And there are people who've just always looked good. It's not that the ones who just sit around and do nothing and somehow have a ripped body, because that usually goes away after high school, like that's
Mhm.
that's a child, teenager type of thing. But the groundwork was laid for you to live a seamlessly active life and not have any trouble keeping body fat off and keeping muscle on and, having a nice fit athletic body. So there's that person. Then the middle ground is the person like the people like me or you who have not always had the bodies that we've had to work not only really hard to achieve bodies that we're proud of, both the way they look and what they can do, but also our attitude and our body dysmorphia and our self-image around that body, both when it was not how we wanted it to be and even now, currently. So,
Mhm.
but some people, to your point, some people are still going to look at us and project their insecurities and say, well, it must be easy for you as a fit person, as a muscular person, as somebody who looks good, as somebody who can run and jump and lift weights, and while discounting how we got here. While others,
Yeah.
it's the perfect balance of like, I know that you weren't always like this, and you've shown me that it's possible to get here. And then, of course, if it's a professional coaching or teaching relationship, then you have to have the skills and the knowledge to actually be able to break it down too. But that's almost separate from this conversation because it's like they so that's the middle ground, right? So you've got the natural person, you've got the person who's achieved it through hard work, and then some people truly would rather learn from the person who's not there yet, but is getting there.
Mm.
The person who's not, doesn't look very fit, is struggling to do really athletic things, but they're better today than they were yesterday. And, maybe they're 10 pounds lighter, 10 pounds less body fat than they were a month ago or 2 months ago. and they can run a little bit faster, and they're documenting the process.
Yeah.
And, I think we had a conversation about this because I had read one of the, business online marketing guys that I like was saying um, that, it's all about relatability in that way. People want to see the journey. They don't necessarily need information. They don't need another talking head telling them what's the right way, what's the wrong way. Here's some tips. Here's what you should do. But rather, they want to witness the transformation in real time. And I do think there's something to be said for that, because people can connect to, like, imagine, it's almost like when you watch a TV show or you read a book and you connect to the characters. It's like you you're watching this person day in and day out. It hits differently than just reading about them or just learning their story and knowing what they've gone through to achieve this. But if you're with them through the journey with them, you've taken that and you have a real connection to their story, almost like you lived it yourself. And so
Mhm.
at the end of the day, just to circle it back to my original point, is that if it's something like self-love coaching, fitness coaching, photography, nude photography, something that requires vulnerability and connection, perhaps that journey piece and not positioning yourself as the expert who has it figured out is going to garner the most connection that you could possibly get out of another human being, causing them to perhaps want to work with you and all your messiness, not in spite of your messiness, but because of your messiness, more than they would want to work with a highly credentialed, famous person or super athlete or, famous photographer or whatever. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yep. 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 Yeah, you wrapped it up. You wrapped it up very nicely. Um, I guess where I kind of question how to go about that relatability piece is, and this is just a personal thing that I don't know the answer to, but where do you draw the line of how much you're documenting like your daily life and everything that you're doing versus just living life? Because like, I don't know, 6 years ago or something, I going through all the shit of my life. I was being really vulnerable about it. I was sharing the journey. I was sharing my morning coffee. I was sharing my reflections. I was just bearing my heart and soul to the world. And I got so much good feedback. And I mean, we connected during that time. And I had a very engaged audience that felt like they were part of the journey, or they were witnessing something and able to reflect it back into their own healing process. And I think I just burnt out at some point, and I just like it just became too much to share all that stuff, and or the intensity of the pain that I was going through in that process, it like became less, which is great. I've moved beyond that. And so now there's not as much turbulence. And so it's not like, oh my God, I'm dealing with this difficult thing. Like it's become much more mellow, and it's not extreme, and it's great. And I think with that mellowness, I kind of have created a little bit of protection around it of like, this is like I'm in an okay place. I'm not going to amplify the bad feelings or amplify the good feelings. And just to also just be more, I took a stance of wanting to incubate things a little bit longer, because in the past, I would just be like, okay, I'm just sharing. Like, I'm not going to take extra time to reflect and to process and putting it out there. And that worked for that time. But now I just naturally pivoted to like, I'm going to sit with this for a little bit longer. And then that morphed into something where I felt like, okay, well, now I sat with it and now there's something new. And so I would just process and then like leave it behind, and then I'd move forward, and then I just wouldn't get to the point where I processed something and I felt like, okay, now I can share this because I moved on to the next thing. But now I just feel like I'm kind of bringing back the question of how much do I want to share about my daily life and what I'm going through, and how much do I want to be documenting? those things because I really want to immerse myself in the present moment. I don't like, I want to take pictures for memories, and like the snowmobile adventure is a great example. I didn't take pictures. I had my camera, but my hands were so cold that I left it in my backpack. So that wasn't out of like not pulling myself out of the present moment, but just things like that is like there's a healthy documentation of life and storytelling. And so kind of figuring out the line of like, well, I'm not going to share the food that I ate. Like, oh, look at the sandwich that I made with my gluten-free bread. But figuring out like the balance of what is too much, what is the right amount, and how much do I want to pull people into my story who are just possibly just consuming and not even being there for a dialogue.
That is a great question. You know, when we interact with people in real life before social media, there was always been different boundaries for different people. That's normal. So some people are entitled to know about certain things and others are just not, and you decide that. You as the person sharing decide that. So you if you have sort of healthy boundaries, you don't just meet somebody and then spill your guts about the most deepest, darkest personal things that ever happened to you. Some people do that. I would say that that's probably an oversharing indication of some boundary issues.
Mm.
But then there are some people who are really close to you who have earned that privilege to that level of information from you. And part of it has to do with connection, and I think part of it has to do with strategy. And so if we're talking about sharing with social media, then it's kind of, especially at the point if you're sharing as somebody uh who's coaching or who's offering a service that's like, for example, your self-love coaching or my stress management, my physiological resilience stuff, then it's like I can share things about myself, but it's got to be strategic because people on Instagram, they're not my friends. I have some friends who are also Instagram followers, but maybe they learn about me separately through a friend container.
Mhm.
Whereas if it's out there in the world on Instagram, and this is just my opinion, and also my opinion is rapidly changing because I'm still learning the ins and outs of being a solopreneur coach and educator online. You know, it's strategy is, again, it's deeply personal. Finding your authentic voice and all of that is just, it's rough waters sometimes, you know. So but my opinion right now is that is that there's some level of authenticity and vulnerability, and sharing your journey is probably important, but where you draw the line might just have to do with strategy, and not strategy in the way of that it's completely self-serving for your brand or whatever, but it's like, will sharing this actually help somebody? Yeah, sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no. Like no, like your sandwich, like nobody where you are and at this point and what your online presence is, nobody's going to benefit from you sharing your sandwich. But if you're going through something that actually might speak to your audience right now, and you've decided like this could actually bring value to them if I open up this experience that I've just had, then I think that that can be smart business wise, and also it can really help you connect to people. I don't just mean you, I mean anybody in general.
Yep. Yep. And the strategy too being tuning into like what feels good. And we always come back to authenticity. I like I just I've been thinking about all our podcasts and what we talk about, and we have very specific themes, I think, like purpose and authenticity and I don't know, other ones that we just kind of circle back to. And I mean, that is a big question that I hear a lot with the purpose. piece and strategy is like, but how do you know? Like, we live in a world where we have infinite options. It's just the world is smaller. My grandparents have told me before, they're like, I don't know how you aren't overwhelmed like every moment of your life because you could do anything. You could be anyone. Like they had a specific trajectory laid out for them. There was like one path and they followed it. And now it's just like it's endless. And so coming back to authenticity, yeah, that's the question that I hear from people is how do you know which path it is? And I don't like the only way that, and this is maybe where I need to come back to the beginner mindset because I've always been guided by just following purpose and following my passion. And there's never, like, I went from university, I was encouraged by my parents very gratefully to go into the arts. And then after graduation, I immediately started my own business and moved abroad. And so I've just always been led by following my heart and what feels good. And so that is one area where I need to come back to helping people to like really kickstart from a place of nothing or a place from structure. And the answer that I just, the only answer I have is like, you know, you tune into yourself, you know yourself enough that you feel which path feels good. And it's like what we've talked about before with following your intuition. Like you go to this store or this store and you just start to understand what that gut feeling feels like and your heart. And like even yesterday, I was deciding, do I go get a haircut tonight or do I go tomorrow? And I really wanted to go last night. I just was like, I'm tired. What else do I have to do with my life right now? I want to go. I need to go to the grocery store. And it just didn't feel right. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll go tomorrow. And then it just, but the more that I pushed, like my brain really wanted last night. And the more I pushed it, it just felt bad. Like you just start and you don't, it's hard to describe that feeling until you spend enough time with yourself tuning into that to really know somatically what it feels like. And yeah, I mean, that's what it always comes back to is like knowing yourself and having that alone time to tune into that.
Yeah. And that is rooted in enough science, enough physiology for me to say, me to be comfortable saying that this applies to everybody. It really does. There have been studies where they monitored people predicting the stock market, and those with higher vagal tone, which is the function of the vagus nerve, which I can explain in a second if that's appropriate. But people with higher vagal tone were more accurate in predicting the stock market. The vagal tone means how well your vagus nerve is functioning. The vagus nerve is responsible for communicating body to brain sensations. So it's a huge player in your interoceptive awareness or your awareness of your internal state, your internal environment. So can you sense things like your heartbeat? Can you sense those gut feelings? Can you sense changes in temperature in your body? Think about body scan meditations, yoga nidra, all those protocols that have you tuned deeply into nuanced sensations deep inside your body. It turns out that your ability to do that and the practice of doing that regularly actually makes your intuition better, which makes sense because they're kind of one and the same. So I would say I would say no matter who you are, a great foundational place to start, and I'm telling this to myself too, because if I'm being authentic and relatable right now, I don't practice what I preach 100% of the time. I'll fall off the wagon too. And I think in my presence online, I need to show more of that. I think I need to be a little bit more relatable in this way because I do think I talk a lot, and I do think it can come off as I'm preaching if I don't also include both what I can do, like demonstrate a little bit more how it's positively affecting my life, but also demonstrating the times that I'm human. And so I'm telling myself this too, and I'm telling everybody, this is my experiment. I'm telling you as somebody who's coming with me on the journey. I'm not telling you as a as a breathing, body awareness, and nervous system expert, I am telling you, as somebody who needs to do his body awareness practice daily, once again, and figure some things out with my own intuition. So this is important for all of us, and let's do it together.
Yeah. Let's all be, let's spew out our vulnerability to everyone on the internet. I'm
No,
just kidding.
let's not do
That was,
let's if that feels like you, this is what you do. You do your body awareness practice, you get deep into your intuition, and then if that really feels right, deep within your soul, where you're like, I need to go on Instagram right now and just vomit everything, then knock yourself out.
uh, man, we're not recording a video of this, but you should have seen Griffin's face. He was like, I thought we were going in the opposite direction. Is that really her conclusion?
No.
Yep.
No, I wasn't. Was I like that? No.
Oh, no.
No, I think this is, I'm not using my mind to try to pull us into any direction. I think it's beautiful where this conversation ended up, and it's cool that many roads lead to the importance of interoceptive awareness and spending time with yourself and developing your intuition at a deep non-verbal, mental level. So
Mm-hmm.
it's been a great conversation, and hopefully this has shown some light in all seriousness, because we've shared a little bit that it's clear that we don't have 100% of things figured out. So hopefully you can take some things from the expertise that we have gained along the way, but also relate to us a little bit, that we are just humans unpacking this stuff as we talk, and we're grateful that you're here to listen with us. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Very grateful. So maybe something to start on the beginner path of this journey is just to simply go for a walk without any input. Like, don't listen to music. Just maybe take your phone if you really have to, but you could leave it at home and walk and sit on a rock or a stump or something and just like breathe and listen to the trees, listen to the birds, and just kind of sit in silence and just be curious about what comes up in your mind. And don't judge it. Just be like, okay, well, that's interesting. And if it's difficult, whatever comes up, it's probably normal. So just kind of give yourself a little bit of compassion for yourself, whatever it is.
Amen. And we'd love to hear how that goes. So let us know. You can DM us on Instagram. All the Spotify show notes will have our contact info and everything. And
Yeah.
thanks again for listening. We will see you next time.
Thank you. See you next time.